This is the Agoro Carbon Farming Podcast. Agoro Carbon Alliance is taking action on a global scale to reverse the effects of climate change by decarbonizing farming and restoring carbon to the world's soil. On this podcast, we're going to explore carbon farming from the soil to the atmosphere and how it affects everyone in between. To learn more, visit us at agorocarbonalliance.com. Welcome to another edition of the Agoro Carbon Farming Podcast. Today, we're joined by Brekke Munks, a passionate carbon cropping agronomist from Wyoming, my home state, and Jess Peterson, the Society for Range Management's Executive Vice President. And today, we're going to discuss the impact of carbon farming. We're going to cover how grazing producers are adopting carbon programs, or maybe they're not. We'll find out here in a short bit. The benefits beyond carbon credits and the insights into the Good Grazing Makes Cents program. We'll also cover some advice on how to navigate the carbon contracts and the potential financial gains for producers. Jess, thanks for joining us. Brekke, thanks for being back on the podcast.
Thanks for having us here today, Scott.
Great to be here.
Jess, you're up in Montana. You're doing all things range management up there. You've even made it part of your career. How are these carbon programs being received by grazing producers? Is it something that they're talking about? Are they skeptical? How is it being received?
Well, lots of folks are talking about it. And so how it's being received is, at the end of the day, this is what's so exciting about you say carbon farming. So with respect to the podcast, carbon farming, but it's
carbon grazing.
I was going to say, you have to have a more active phrase for us because we're big on the grazing side, the management side, managing your carbon, managing your grazement. It's in our name, Society for Range Management. Management is right there. And so for us, we're excited from the society's perspective. I'm excited as a cattle producer, as a grazier, what the knowledge, the information that's out there, the experts that Brekke and others and the folks at Agoro on all the different carbon credit platforms are bringing to the countryside. It's a lot of it of what we've been talking about, Society for Range Management, for years. The benefits of biodiversity of grazing, the benefits of grazing rotations, the benefits of basically knowing your grasses, knowing your turnout seasons, not turning out in the same pasture. So for us, we're excited because we've been talking about this for a while at the Society for Range Management. A lot of times we say, we're at the Society for Range Management. We're the world's best kept secret. And we like to get away from that. And along comes you carbon credit folks. And you have these swanky podcasts and these great venues and these great places to chat and these huge, you reach the masses. So hat tip to that, because I think what we're doing is we're connecting it. We're connecting the folks. We're connecting the information. And again, we'll get down to that into this podcast. Whether or not you sign up a carbon credit contract, that's a business, that's a personal, that's a decision that you all make. But what excites me about that is all the information you can learn and gather in that process, right? So if you're a carbon credit company, you would want someone to sign up. I would say from a Society for Range Management perspective, just by interacting with the folks at Agoro and other carbon alliances, you're going to learn a lot. You're going to think about things going home. So I would say it's being received really well because of this is good science when you get down to the management of what it takes to look at carbon sequestration, apply those models. So I would say the reception is very strong, very well, because of what you can apply, and it's going to benefit regardless if you sign up for the carbon credit program or not. It's going to benefit your bottom line because these are good grazing management techniques that need to be applied.
I don't think that could have started the podcast better with that statement.
So we'll end it now then. We'll just go downhill. I guarantee I'll go downhill from here.
You've heard of the philosophy in a conversation, the peak end, right? You were at the peak, you might as well shut it down. But Brekke, from your standpoint, you're out there working for Agoro and educating ranchers about the programs and hopefully trying to get them to sign up for the programs. Obviously, they're not kicking you out of their offices or off of their land. What do you hear from the the grazers out there? Graziers, is that what you called them, Jess? Graziers?
Oh, anything technical, we go to Breck on that. So Breck, take it from there.
Okay.
I like the word graziers. Absolutely. Very, very, foofy. That being said, however, the interactions we have at Agoro Carbon Alliance with our producers are very favorable. We also have people who are genuinely interested in their soil health and the longevity of their livelihood. And that's essentially what backs this program. Just like Jess said, it doesn't matter if you sign up with Agoro or another company. Go out and get your information. Talk to lots of people and, spend a little time on Dr. Google and checking things out, learning about carbon or going back to, your soil 101, maybe college class, or maybe you took a workshop through extension or something sometime about the soil health aspects. Carbon is at the center of that. And when we build our carbon in our soil through cover cropping and row crops, or through the addition of other species in our forage systems, or enhancing our improved grazing, or utilizing inputs, fertilizers, compost tea, manure, nitrogen, we start to build that carbon in the ground in the form of organic matter. And the big thing here is that I always think is a real clinching point for producers is when they realize that as we build carbon over time, which we know is a slow process, it doesn't happen, we go to sleep and all of a sudden we've got all this carbon in the ground. Over time, they are able to build their water holding capacity, which is huge in a forage production system. We increase soil organic matter by 1%. That equals 1 inch of water. So even if we do 0.5% here in Wyoming, if we had 0.5% of organic matter to our, 1.9% that we start out with, that's 0.5 inch of water. And in a drought year, that can mean I don't have to haul in feed. I might utilize less supplemental tubs. I might not have to sell cattle at the rate I normally would have to because I can't support them. That's a huge deal. And the big situation, obviously, with a carbon credit program is there's the ability for a secondary income stream, obviously, to help support some of these changes for those producers, aside from the non-profit enhancements. And that even goes even further. And Jess and I can get into this more in a grazing system, whether that be cattle or sheep or goats. We like all grazers in the carbon market. We're not species specific. Let's put it that way. When you have hooves on the landscape, they bring microbes to the soil, which then enhances the soil microbe population, which changes the carbon and nitrogen cycling below the ground, which is really beneficial, really improves pest control, not only on the surface in the form of weeds, but also in the pathogens seen in those herds, because when we change those dynamics, animals get healthier, which then also means that ranchers see this in their bottom line. Their vet bills decrease. Sometimes they have a much better calving rate. They have a much better conception rate because their herds are healthier. Their weaning weights can go up. There's so many benefits to just storing carbon in the ground, which are huge for a producer. Aside from that, you can have cleaner water, which is a huge situation, particularly out here in the West.
Jess, I have to apologize. As I'm listening to all these great things that Breck is talking about, I was thinking, well, wait a minute, I'm not sure I know, and maybe there's some listeners that don't know, what is the Society for Range Management? What is that organization? What do you guys do? What do you promote?
A lot of the research that Breck just outlined it right there. The Society for Range Management. I mean, she just took 70 years of what we've been working on and summed it up in 7 minutes.
Is she on the payroll?
I am not, but I pay my dues every year.
She's a dues paying us, remember, and we wish they all spoke as eloquent as she did and didn't have such a letdown when it came to the leadership and the executive vice president role. But in any case, Society for Range Management is the international society. So we're not just here in the U.S., not just here in Canada, Mexico, but the international society, Mongolia, Australia, all the rangelands across the world, all the research that goes into it. So the academia, all the practitioners, the public land, private land management agencies from USDA to the Bureau of Land Management, Department of Interior, along with the ranchers, and so all that comes together to form. So we have the 2 peer-reviewed journals, Rangelands Ecology Management and Rangelands. We have an annual conference every year that brings in anywhere from 12 to 15 to 16, 1,800 folks from across the country, student competitions, both at the high school and college level, and along with amazing poster, technical sessions, presentations, plenary, just all the research. And what I love is what Breck talked about. I could just hear folks in the Society of Range Management, some of them cheering her on, and some of them go, wait, no, that's not quite accurate. Wait. Exactly. There will always be this debate, the forum at SRM of, well, what Breck is saying is not quite right. In my perspective, my research, right, we always say at the Society of Range Management, it is the forum for debate. We're really careful a lot of times that, well, SRM's not very active, or you haven't validated this or stood out and made a really big, resounding, side on this. We really try to be that forum. And what we then do, we always go back to the range science. We always go back to the range health. We can go back to those range indicators, but practices, my gosh, a practice can vary from county, from climate, from weather. And so it's oftentimes you have some folks over here that say, well, don't even talk to me about the benefits of crested wheat, or dare even say cheatgrass. And then you got someone over here going, without cheatgrass at certain times, I don't know what we'd have in the soil. Without crested wheat on this pasture here, I don't know what we would do. But I can tell you what we all agree on is dirt. We don't like dirt.
No, it is not called dirt in this podcast. Mr. Jess Peterson, it is soil.
If you'll let me finish, thank you. Thank you. So we don't like dirt. We like soil. And dirt blows when it doesn't have proper management. When it doesn't have a proper cover crop, it becomes dirt. It's dust in the air. We don't like that. If you don't have proper grazing management, it becomes dirt and it blows out on rangeland. So we all know there's one thing we can all align on. We don't like dirt. We like soil. We like healthy soil, and we like healthy rangelands. And so the society has been championing this since 1948. And was actually built out of the Society of American Foresters when they felt at that time, it needed to be kind of a Western group, the American Society for Range Management. And then they looked and said, this should be international. And we've went to such a high level now. And this is exciting. We're putting it right here on the Carbon Farming Podcast worldwide. They have these international years. You might recall a few years back, International Year of Soils. You're coming up in 2026. International Year of Rangelands and Pastoralists. And amazing collaboration of all the countries from across the world working on rangelands. SRM played a role in it, but we definitely had some global players that did an amazing job. And I just want to take just a moment to reflect on one of our heroes, one of our champions, an amazing rangeland leader from Nebraska. Jim O'Rourke was just a champion for this. Sadly, Jim did not get to see this come to fruition. He passed away here in early March. So I want to give him a hat tip and a appreciation for folks like him that went all around the world to champion the International Rangeland. So Society of Range Management, again, we are that forum for what you just heard with Breck and I, a good hearty debate on topics for the science, for the application of range management. And every year we meet in February in a location. We hope you'll join us. You can go on rangelands.org and learn more and find out, get engaged.
So Society of Range Management seems like they've been ahead of the game for many decades and started debating and talking about these practices that help build carbon in the soil, help build soil health, which is beneficial in a number of different ways, like Breck just talked about, not only for the soil health and the plant health, the water holding capacities, but also for the living creatures on top of the soil, whether that be sheep or cattle or anything like that. So to me, as kind of an outsider, I'm saying the Society for Range Management and a company such as Agoro Carbon Alliance, it seems like it's a great marriage because both of you are talking about the same thing and helping growers understand those practices. Breck, as you talk to ranchers, what are some of the misconceptions about the practices or the practice changes? What are some of the things that they're a little bit apprehensive about?
So essentially at Agoro Carbon Alliance, we offer 3 practices to sign you up with our carbon credit programming. And that is an improvement in rotational grazing, changing your biodiversity. So seeding something in to increase your forage capability, and the utilization of nitrogen. And you can stack those however you want, which is pretty exciting. When it comes to going and talking with a rancher, often they self-reject themselves from our program because they are wonderful land managers to begin with, and they assume they can't tweak anything. But one of the things is you sit down and you learn about their current practices and you say, hey, where do you want to be in 5 years? Where do you want to be in 10 years? What's your long-term plan? And a lot of it has to deal with increase in forage production. Everybody would like more food, whether that's to sell it or to be able to feed it or be able to graze it during the winter, essentially. And we can always tweak the grass that's on the ground in some format. We look at essentially the bare ground cover out there and say, well, we got too much bare ground. Maybe we can interseed something. And there's places in the U.S. that we just don't have the water, and the evapotranspiration is high, and getting something to germinate is a real struggle, and it might not happen. So we might not set you up for that. We don't want to set anybody up to fail, for sure. The other major apprehension is rotational grazing. I've got the best grazing program I possibly can. There is no way you can improve it. And there are some people out there that literally have it just locked in, and it's hard to tweak it. And that's one of the big things with any carbon program. We have to show additionality. We have to show a change to what you were previously doing in order to be able to be enrolled so we can have registered carbon credits. One of the big things with rotational grazing, an improvement in rotational grazing, is possibly adding some more fence and making smaller pastures and changing your rotation dates, increasing rest days if we can do that. Jess mentioned that you change your rotation pattern. If you have 48 fields and you rotate 1 through 48 in 2024, then possibly you go every other one in 2025, or you go every 5th one, or maybe you just reverse it if that's what you need to do. You want to change the rest days, because when we change the rest days on any forage system, that allows the roots to grow below ground growth, which provides plant longevity, which is really important. And it also provides control with soil erosion. And so we have less of that quote unquote dirt blowing around, essentially, because there's aggregates to build that soil, which is really, really important. I mean, there's some skepticism obviously associated with the carbon market. The one thing here in the United States is we're completely voluntary. There is nothing saying you have to do this. You voluntarily sign up. That's your choice as a producer. And there's benefit to it, obviously, carbon credit money. There's these non-monetized benefits like we've listed that are in perpetuity when you manage correctly, which is great. And the skepticism around the program has a lot to do with previous climate exchanges and them potentially failing or having failed, people not being paid. That's not what Agoro Carbon Alliance is about. We do pay our producers. We do so very well and continually sign people up. But the one thing here is, and Jess and I banter about this on a regular basis, is if you are even remotely interested in a carbon credit program, get on Google and Google carbon credit programs. Go to agorocarbonalliance.com and see what it takes. Maybe sign up and talk to one of our sales agronomists. They'll come straight out to your ranch. No cost to you. They will give you a plan, and you can either take it or leave it. But when you even remotely think you should start looking at a carbon program, shop around and learn from every single one of them. Everybody out in the market has something different to offer, and it is really important to get your feet under you to know what they're about.
The website you mentioned, agorocarbon.com, has a knowledge hub there that has just a bunch of great information. And I will say, in my experience dealing with the sales agronomists at Agoro, I think we need to change the name. Maybe we can lobby this with your HR department and take the sales part of it out. It seems like their focus is on good agronomy first and foremost, and not the sales. So maybe we call them agronomists who sell. I don't know.
Well, so that's the fun thing. We always banter around too about that within the company, because we're input agnostic. We're not selling anything. We are trying to get you to sign up for a concept as a producer, and then we will pay for those carbon credits. And we don't sell you anything. So sales is totally bogus. But yes, when you get us out there to your production system, it comes with multiple years of backed experience from the fertilizer industry, from precision ag, from many, many different realms. And we've got a huge pool of knowledge that we can pull from if people have questions.
So it's almost like, Scott, you wished, if I hear you correctly, you wish or your vision would be good agronomy makes sense. If only there was some other phrase out there that we could talk about that's similar to that. Maybe it is. Maybe this thing maybe Society for Range Management should have something called Good Grazing Makes Sense.
Boy, that's a great idea, Jess.
Wait, we do. Should we try that? Should we talk about that in this show? I mean, a good agronomy makes sense. I mean, you guys, we could really make this thing go. I mean, and actually Good Grazing Makes Sense. Agoro was one of our first partners to come on board and help us get the word out.
So Jess is joking, of course. There is a program called Good Grazing Makes Sense. Tell us a little bit about that program.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So no, we are excited. We are excited. And for those that are listening out there, if you want, it's a reduced rate to join if you're part of any livestock organization, or get on Facebook, find it. You can find it on goodgrazing.org. You can find it on rangelands.org. Also, the goal of what we've just been talking about here. How do you get all this information? How do you get all the science? How do you get all the research that's been done and apply it? And not just, again, if I look at Montana, we're not even talking about Kansas, California, Wyoming, Colorado, and all across the country. You look at counties can be different. You can't just say, well, does that work in Montana? Does that work in Carbon County versus Park County? What's the rainfall? What's the forage? What's the history and whatnot? And so what's exciting about Good Grazing Makes Sense with a C, because we believe you advance the science, you do good with good grazing, you're going to actually improve your bottom line. If you can, going back to what Brekke talked about, going back to what Agoro will actually in Carbon Alliance programs have you doing, you can actually get contracts that will provide dollars for that, but also the benefits that Brekke keeps talking about. Good grazing does make sense, both from a common sense perspective and sense in the bank account perspective. And the fact that knowing that maybe you should, the time that you're rotating pastures, the time that you're, as Brekke referenced again, resting pastures, and sometimes you say, wow, it's so difficult. But we're finding, I mean, we're look. I always say, I'm a petri dish. I got a small petri dish as far as working on the leashes that I have. It's kind of my grazing petri dish. I'll say, well, I'll try this and it'll fail. I'll say, okay, and so a lot of it. But I like to apply some of that, because what happens then is you can see that you actually can take that on. You can try something new. So in our case, doing more winter grazing versus summer grazing, we're finding out just again on some of these crested wheat pastures, like we need to be resting, and we were stockpiling grasses. We thought we were doing everything right. We did a GGMC session actually on that ranch. We're like, wait, we need to be resting this time frame and coming out and we can do a fall graze on that. We can do a winter graze, but that is the type of stuff. So what we wanted then is, whether you're a longstanding grazier, producer, someone that's managing grass, any livestock, and you're out there, and as Brekke's a lot of good, we have a good grazing plan. Oh, we know what we're doing. Okay, great. Do you have any questions? Yeah, I've always wondered about this grass here. I've always wondered about when's the best time to graze it. I've always wondered about this. We're going to try some winter grazing. It links all of that up to Good Grazing Makes Sense. So those of you on the grazing side, or even those of you who say, hey, I'd like to connect with some graziers, do that through Good Grazing Makes Sense. In addition to, we have sponsored platforms. You just mentioned that, Scott, saying, and Brekke did too, in the sense of what all is a carbon contract. Yes, we did a Good Grazing Makes Sense platform where, brought to you by Agoro, or Agoro helped with, we brought the lawyers on that said, here's what you need to be aware of when you're signing a contract with a carbon alliance. And we did that. We said, here's all the, all of it, everything you need to know. And we've had panels like that. So again, Good Grazing Makes Sense. We have Facebook live sessions. We have technical sessions at SRM. We have you can just join the Facebook group once you become a member for a nominal fee, and get involved, learn, apply. It's really, really fun. And what I like is it's that no pressure. You can ask that question, snap that picture, ask that question, and then know a lot of times other folks out there have that same question. We're connecting everyone across this great country and globe, and it's very exciting.
But the really fun thing, and I don't think it's been pressed enough, my favorite thing in the whole entire world about SRM are two things. One, it is very much producer facing, and it is unlike any other society internationally because of that. And they also ridiculously support our students. And these are the people we're trying to train to take my job here in a couple of years. And they're doing a darn good job of it. And that is really, really important to me coming from academia, as well as they have their thumbprint on the people doing this, boots on the ground. And when you get into these Good Grazing Makes Sense forums and you snap that photo and upload it, it's not only professional land managers, federal land managers, state people from consulting firms, but it's also the actual true rancher who says, I've seen that too in Nevada, and this is what I did about it. And it is so cool. So it really has a huge, huge global reach. I love it.
Jess, I'm curious. I want you to take off your wingtips and your suit and tie for a minute, as you're an executive vice president of the society, and put on your work boots. Put on your flannel shirt and go out into the field. You've applied some of these practices in the fields and the ranches that you manage. What have been the biggest benefits that you've seen by implementing these changes?
Well, I've never worn a pair of wingtips in my life, so that's easy. But okay, let's take off the coat and tie here. I think anytime you're talking about this space, you need to be uncomfortable. You need to be almost vulnerable. I think I have learned more in my failures.
Of course.
I wouldn't trade my failures. And I think every time Breck and I interact, I share, it's like therapy. I share the last decade of failures I've had on improving soil health. I thought, case in point is, we'll just no-till drill everything and no chemical. Well, you got to have a little chemical to get to the no-till, or if you're doing no-till, there's got to be a combination of chemical. Then you kind of phase out. You get past life beyond chemical. But, you learn that soil was kind of responding to what it's had for years and years before you. And I bought the land that I didn't want, but that I could afford. The land I wanted was just up the road that I lost to Bill Gates or insert here movie star. So I got the go background that I could afford. And then I said, well, I was just like I said, I was stockpiling grasses, crested wheat. And then my pairs were going backwards, and I was like, for crying out loud. And so then when I took a grass lease on, we started doing replacement heifers and yearlings, and folks said, well, how can you truck cattle to different counties? I said, yeah, we're going to put a fuel under our cattle and not to cattle. We're not going to be driving to them hay all winter and different ways in the summer to deal with them. And so, from my perspective, it's being so excited to go out there. I go to an SRM meeting, I go and talk to Breck, and I go and apply it, and I fail miserably. And because you learn, but in that you can turn around. And again, I go back to Good Grazing Makes Sense. I go back to these Carbon Alliance folks, such as Agoro, that say, hey, Jess, that's okay. You're still moving in that direction. This is what you could modify a little bit, because I can tell you it's that first step that you struggle with. So for me, that's actually been rewarding, because now I look at some of these practices and then almost quote unquote overnight, we were able to, case in point, to bring on more cattle. We're doing a programmed cattle feeding operation. It means they can't be in a confined unit. They have to be on open grazing based on the contract that we have for the grazing side. We were doing paddock grazing, which is a part of a carbon credit program. We were doing cover crops and all the rest. And then all of a sudden we found out we're scaled up to be able to take in more cattle than we originally thought we could. Nice. So now you start to see a little bit of I got to share a little bit of the fruits of the labor, the little benefits here. Absolutely. But I go back to it from Breck's perspective. What I like about a carbon contract is you need some folks say, And to each their own. There's some ranches that if they apply this, their bottom line, their operating note looks a lot better than mine does. And I'm not ashamed to admit that. And they're going to say, great, that's dollars in our back pocket. For a lot of folks such as me, I would get that carbon contract and say, thank goodness, not all of that seed that I planted through the carbon contract was growing, but I had cost share with Agoro. I had dollars coming in that could help that. It's not that every time you step up to the plate, you're going to hit a home run. You might only hit a base hit, but you might get tagged out, but you get to come up. You got a team when you're working with a carbon provider. You get to come back in. There's somebody else batting in the lineup behind you, and you win as a team. And so you get those dollars, you get that in your operation. As you said, you work with that technical expert and you're able to advance it. Otherwise, the last thing you want to do is work on your farm or ranch or grazing operation or anything when it links to grazing management. You don't want to operate in a silo. You just don't.
Yeah.
And so this helps you get out there, learn. At the end of the day, if a carbon contract fits for you, it allows some dollars that hopefully will help pad your pocket, but they could help you if you have some losses and help you be a little bit more, take on a slight more risk to say, well, I don't know if I want to do that grazing plan. I don't know if I want to put that fertilizer out there. Well, it's part of your carbon contract and we're going to get you some dollars to help cover that.
That's a really good point. And one thing that I've learned talking to growers and ranchers is when you're implementing new changes, first of all, you're exactly right, Jess. The failures are where you learn the most. So it's important to take some baby steps. You don't go all in with all of your acres all at once.
Take a section. If there was just a podcast out there, then I could have learned this. Where were you 20 years ago?
You don't have to go in head first. You can dip your toe in, and that's the important thing here.
Other people can. I will always go head first and whine about it later. But Scott, I interrupt you onto a great point. Yeah, take it one step at a time. Go ahead.
Take it one step at a time, and try to involve as much information as much people on your team as you can to minimize the risk, to make sure that the failure isn't as catastrophic as it can be. And to Breck, I want to ask you, on your team that you're working with a grower, you're bringing that team together to analyze their specific operation. As Jess mentioned, it's different in each county to county, from whether you're in the highlands or the lowlands. Each grower has specific needs and circumstances. To bring that team together, what should a producer be aware of when they're going into a contract with Agoro Carbon? What kind of information do you think that they need, and what does Agoro supply?
So one of the beautiful things about our contract is it's made to encompass one shoe doesn't fit everybody, which is awesome. I use the word plastic. We can mold it to you, depending on whether you're in Florida or you're in Washington or you happen to be in the panhandle of Texas or here in Wyoming. We can mold it to you. We do have some, I guess, hard line items. Our minimal contract is 500 acres. So that's the lowest we can go.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is a hardliner. One thing too is before you just sign a contract, our sales agronomists come out and visit you. They look at your place. Like I said, they ask you what practices you're interested in implementing. We go and tour your area because there's some areas, frankly, that are wetlands. We can't enroll those. And we can't, there's areas that, because I've worked in multiple places in the United States, that when it is just very alkaline soils and there's nothing growing, it is going to be really hard in the 10-year contract period of our contract to get ground cover there. There's lots of other things we're going to have to do in order to prep that soil. So there's areas that we will just say, we're not going to do anything here. But, the majority of your production system, if you want to sign it up, yeah, these are the things we can do. We will set out a grazing program for you if you're interested in our improved grazing management program. We will also, if you're looking at increasing your forage diversity, I always like to ask, where are you calving? Where do you wean? Where do you like to put summer cattle? Are they here, or do you have mountain leases? We don't do federal leasing at this juncture. The one thing though is that when you start to learn where people are moving their cows, you can start putting species there to benefit the cow given the stress cycle they might be in. So if they're weaning, there's a certain different protein and fiber need for those cattle, as is if you've got mama cows in a certain place, they have stress that you can help mitigate by the food going into them. And I like to diversify those fields based on that type of stress. Also, the options I would plant in Oklahoma are very different than the options I would plant in eastern Montana or in the Palouse because of the weather cycle, right? And sometimes there's areas I'm only wanting to plant cool season grasses. So we can have maybe a 2 grazing cycle, maybe depending on the year. But we could co-crop that essentially with a warm season grass. So we extend the longevity and essentially at that juncture also give us some insurance. If we don't have a really, really hot summer, those cool seasons are going to do cool season forages are going to do really, really well. But if we have drought and then a little bit of rain in June, those warm season forages are going to just spike and we're going to be able to benefit for that. So I like to think about that for biodiversity, and you get that with our team of people that come to your production system. When it comes to nitrogen, we also assess that, what might be most available or what could be better utilized in your system. It's not one size fits all. When you officially ink that contract with us, you get handed off essentially to our team called Grower Success. Also, many agronomists on that team, and they ask you about management records. They looking at, your fertilizer addition or what seeds you did plant, because we need that in order to show that you have in fact done that when we register your credits. But at that juncture, that's like a direct phone call. You have a person at Agoro that So if I sign up Tom and I'm their grower success person, Breck, Tom has my number and he can call me whenever he wants.
Nice.
If he has a problem. And there is that very, very close agronomic help all the time through the longevity of that contract, free of charge. And we help solve weed problems. We help solve irrigation problems. We help do a lot of different things.
Boy, it sounds like it's a way to get some free advices on how I'm using my ranch. Hey, Jess, remind us really quick, what is the website for the Good Grazing Makes Cents?
You betcha. So you just go to goodgrazing.org. You can
goodgrazing.org.
Goodgrazing.org. So you can put that that'll be a link there in your podcast notes for further reading.
Of course.
And in addition to that, you can go to rangelands.org and find it too, but goodgrazing.org, you find it pretty easy that way. And come on, join us. And of course, just Google Good Grazing Makes Sense on Facebook. That's really where the interactive platform takes place. And I still can't say meta, so we're going to just I'm old school for the duration here, and we'll leave it at that.
What else, if someone's made it to the end of this episode, we're hoping that some did, Jess, what is a lasting message that you would like to leave with them? Yeah,
the person that into this podcast, you have a new pickup waiting for you out front. So congratulations. Yeah. Talk to Breck. And she will set you up with that new pickup. There you go. No, you know what? I just think I get so excited about this, and I say this. And oftentimes it's, that's great. You have, Society for Ranch Management, you have a day job, and I'm very blessed. I'm very grateful for my day job and the membership and the folks that are listening, they're SRM members, and the folks that will be joining SRM after they listen to this podcast, longstanding members like Breck and my board, my bosses. So I have the luxury of having a day job. And oftentimes when you come on there and somebody says, well, that's great. You're out there talking about how you should just give this a try. It's not for me. I'm a product of the 80s. We had some struggles in the 80s, like a lot of folks did with farm policy, weather, didn't have crop insurance at that time. And so my family had to sell out and was able to lease back, buy back some ground, but it's been a struggle. And my folks had carryover ink, like a lot of folks did, red ink. And so a lot of the work I'm doing now is I was able to buy out my folks on a piece of ground. They'll do a lot of leases. It won't happen in my lifetime. It'll happen in my 2 daughters' lifetime, where all the debt will finally be, I hope, will be kind of leveled out. So when I talk about this stuff, yeah, I have an operating note. I have a land note. I have a principal debt note as I'm working through these, but I'm very optimistic. I'm very much a believer in it. So I think when folks say, yeah, easy for you to say you're sitting there behind a desk, I can tell you, just as we've talked about on this podcast, I've learned with the best of them. And I see this, and I actually believe in it, and I put my paycheck and my dollars on the line to actually pay it all back. I believe in this stuff. I truly believe in these practices, applying these practices. I can tell you, I joked about the failures, and it was pretty serious too, but the successes are real. They can happen. And I can tell you,
right,
when you grab that soil, when you improve that soil, when you pull up, when you look at those root systems that you've advanced, when you look at some plant diversity that you've advanced, when you look at that forage, and you can never get excited enough about this stuff. Even, we had some, we were checking cattle here and this was the last week of February in Montana. And we had some of these yearlings were out grazing in the back 40, and we went over there and we thought they were just on dry grass. It was amazing, the green that was popping up because of our grazing programs, and how excited they were, literally not coming in for hay, because now there's 2 feedings a day that we do, and we do this hay busting whole technique. That's for another episode. And they were out there grazing on the green that was popping up in February, Montana. So again, somebody would tell you, I'm sure they say, oh, the cattle in the winter, this won't work. Yes, there's so much to be learned and applied. So again, my wrap up, my call to all is try this. Get this Carbon Alliance individual, a good agronomist that'll make sense on your place as you're following Good Grazing Makes Sense. Get involved, try this stuff. It actually works, and it's an exciting. And I will tell you, if I had to choose who I'd surround myself with, it's optimists. And everyone in this conversation are optimists. Yeah, you can go down to the local watering hole. You can go down to the local cafe and find that corner of the room that everyone's complaining about everything. And how do you feel about walking out of it? That's what excites me about this podcast, about the work that you do, about having these podcasts. They're uplifting. You want to stay. This is a tough business. Stay around the optimists. Know that it can happen and feel a part of that greater community. And I will tell you, at the end of the day, it does improve your bottom line. So if you're challenging, stay in it. And if you haven't taken on the challenge, get into it. The rewards are definitely there, and you will enjoy them.
Excellent. That's a great way to end this episode. Thank you, Jess, for coming on and sharing a little bit more about the Society of Range Management and the Good Grazing Makes Sense program. Really appreciate that. We'll include all the links in the show notes. So if someone's out there driving from one ranch to the other in their pickup truck, that new pickup truck that Brekke provided, you can listen to the podcast.
Your expense account, Jess.
Until next time, thank you for joining the Agoro Carbon Farming Podcast. You've been listening to the Agoro Carbon Farming Podcast, where we bring you knowledge on how to sustainably and profitably transform farming through carbon cropping. To learn more about how you can become a partner, visit us at agorocarbonalliance.com or follow us on our many social media channels: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn.